Hello, and welcome to this webinar on moving to or living in Cyprus. It's part of a series sponsored by global wealth management company, Blevins Franks. And if you're not sure what a global wealth management company does or why you might need their expertise, then that should become apparent as we navigate the financial considerations when leaving the UK and setting up your new life in Cyprus. It's good to see the strong interest in today's webinar. Thank you for your time. Brexit may have provided a few extra hurdles, but living in Cyprus remains a long-held ambition for many people. I have today with me two wonderful experts who are going to share their knowledge and insights. They both work in the Cypriot property market, helping British buyers typically relocate and live in Cyprus. First up is Nick Cairns of Blevins Franks, and secondly, Esme Palos of legal and immigration specialist, Michael Kyprionou. Nick, hello, how are you?
I'm good, Andy. Good. Thank you very much.
And tell us a little bit about your business, who you are, where you're based, and what your role is with Blevins Franks, would you?
Yes, certainly. Blevins Franks, we're wealth management specialists. We help predominantly UK nationals relocate to one of our core countries. As a company, we've been trading for over 45 years, specializing in this area. We've been in Cyprus. This is our 20th year here in Cyprus. I've actually been here on the ground living in Cyprus. I live in Paphos. I've been here for 11 years. And basically, we help people structure their assets, make sure their finances are all in order for them to settle in a new country and become tax resident here in Cyprus.
Great, thanks, Nick. Well, we're going to dig down into the detail of that as we move through this afternoon's webinar. Esme, hello and welcome to this webinar. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm and what it is that you do.
Hello, Andy. My name is Esme Palos. I am a UK qualified barrister at law, and I specialize in immigration and real estate law. Michael Kyprionou Advocates and Legal Consultants is the second largest law firm in Cyprus. We cover all aspects of law, but specifically I specialize in the area of real estate and immigration, and as well as probate and succession, which all blend together. I've been doing this for over 20 years, with a lot of experience in the field, and we are able to provide an all-rounded service to clients relocating to Cyprus when it comes to legal services.
Great, thank you, Esme. And thank you again to everybody who's joined us. If you'd like to put a question to our experts today, if you hover over the bottom of the panel on your laptop or tablet, whatever it is, you should see the Q&A functionality. If you click on that, you can post a question that will come through, and we'll try to answer as many of those directly towards the end of the webinar. Now, we do want to stay true to today's subject. Primarily, we are dealing with people who are relocating. But for people who have bought a holiday home, let's just cover off the most significant change there, Nick, with the time that one can spend in Cyprus post-Brexit. Just run us through what the impact has been for people who have a holiday home, would you?
Yeah, certainly, Andy. Since Brexit, you can now only spend 90 days in any rolling 180 days in a year. So due to the UK obviously leaving the EU, you're going to be very limited to spend any time longer than that sort of period. You need to have some sort of permit to live or to spend longer than 90 days in Cyprus.
Great, and what we find is that suits lots of people who own a holiday home and are still working. They've got 90 out of 180 days, as you say, and it's on a rolling basis, and that satisfies the requirement that they have, but not for people who we're talking about today and focusing on today, which is those people who might be moving permanently, possibly to retire to Cyprus. So once you go over that 180 days, once you do become resident or move towards residency, Nick, what happens in terms of your tax status if you've previously been a tax resident in the UK?
Well, you start to benefit from lower taxes, is a simple answer. If you spend 183 days in Cyprus, you're deemed by the Cyprus authorities as being tax resident here. If you compare the Cyprus taxes to UK taxes, they're considerably lower. Allowances are higher. I mean, just for an example, your personal allowance is 19,500 euros as opposed to the 12,800 that you receive in the UK. So the first 19,500 euros of your retirement income, for example, would be tax-free. There's also special tax rates for overseas pensioners. So if you have pensions coming from outside of Cyprus, so from the UK, and you're bringing your pensions into Cyprus and you're tax resident, the maximum amount of tax you'll pay is 5% on them pensions, which is a considerable saving to what you'd be used to paying in the UK on that type of income. But overall, there's some real good tax angles to move to Cyprus for. I mean, it's not just the only reason that you would move there. You know, most people move for the climate, the slower pace of life, and so on. But if you can have a little bit more money in your pocket and have a little bit more in terms of disposable income to help with your cost of living, it's always helpful.
Do you find when you're dealing with people who are potentially moving over, this is quite a difficult concept to get across? I mean, you're becoming tax liable in a different jurisdiction. You're no longer tax liable back in the UK, you're now tax liable in Cyprus. I mean, how do they go about registering for that or reporting on their local tax liability then? Well, I guess it's their total income, isn't it, that they're reporting on it within Cyprus?
Yeah, there's certain things in Cyprus that aren't taxable, which would be taxable in the UK. So there's finite details that you need to set up to make sure that it meets your circumstances. A big change, a big difference that people tends to confuse people a little bit is that we're used to the fiscal year in the UK. So the UK tax year runs 6th of April through to the 5th of April, whereas Cyprus and a lot of the EU and the rest of the world actually run a calendar year tax year. So Cyprus tax year is the 1st of January to the 31st of December. So you need to be careful when you do move that you actually, you move at the right time, you change your tax residency at the right time. So it's always important to plan your move and make sure that you sort out when the best time for you to do that is.
And what is it that triggers your tax resident start date? What is the kind of the mechanics there in terms of you are then resident from that date versus another date?
Well, it simply is if you're going to spend 183 days in Cyprus within that calendar tax year, you do have to be careful. You do have to be careful if you're coming from the UK as well, that you don't spend too much time in the UK, because you can spend as little as 45 days in the UK and still be deemed tax resident. So you need to make sure that you don't overstep the mark in the UK. HMRC brought into place a test called sufficient ties test about 3 to 4 years ago now, which details, based upon what UK ties you have, how many days you can spend in the UK without being tax resident. Now, that doesn't mean that you'd end up, if you went across them days, that doesn't mean that you'd end up paying double tax in both countries, because there's a dual taxation agreement between the UK and Cyprus. It just means you would be paying the higher rate of tax across the two, which predominantly, the higher rate is the UK rate. So if you don't stay within your days, you lose the benefit of actually being tax resident. So it's all about really planning in advance to make sure that we speak to clients who you say to them, right, based upon your ties, you can spend 90 days in a tax year. And they'll think, well, 90 days isn't a lot. But then if you actually break it down across the year, it's nearly a week a month. And then you sit down with a client 12 months later and they say, 90 days is quite a long time to spend in the UK when you've got the lifestyle that you're living here in Cyprus. So it tends to be a bit daunting initially that they're limited to time, but they tend to fall and slip into the easier life as it becomes practice.
So, people are watching or people are listening and thinking, oh, this all sounds quite complicated. Then this is your kind of bread and butter, is it? You work with people from the moment they decide they do want to relocate, and you kind of get the ducks in line to make sure that it's the most tax efficient way of moving their financial assets.
Absolutely. Planning is the most important word. If you know you're going to be doing something, it's all about planning and timing it and making sure that you get your assets structured in the correct manner for when you do become resident in Cyprus. Certain assets, as I say, for example, ISAs benefit people who are tax resident in the UK. Once you become tax resident in another country, they don't particularly provide any sort of benefit, really. So it's just a case of planning your assets and structuring things in the best way for you to be getting the most out of them, really. Yeah,
that's a good point, I guess, because people within a UK tax system are going to have their assets in UK tax efficient products, such as an ISA that you referred to there, and then that loses its inefficiency when you go somewhere else. So you have to plan what equivalent product or what else you can do with it to make the most of that money, I guess.
That's right, to make it work the best for you, to structure your own circumstances for the place where you're now living.
Yeah, and you'll have a lot of people who are retiring to Cyprus. We know it's a fantastic destination to retire to. Lots of British people do that. Esme, I guess you deal with a lot of British people who are planning their retirement. They come to you to look at residency options and permits that are available. What's the regime currently in Cyprus, and how would one go about planning the residency side versus the wealth management and the tax side that we've already been through with Nick?
Okay, as has already been mentioned, they can stay, any UK nationals can remain in Cyprus for 90 days. From the moment that they wish to extend their stay, whether to explore the possibility of moving here or whether they want to, if they want to move here, then initially they would have to apply for what is called a temporary residency permit, a visitor's permit, which is valid for a year and renewable every year, provided the criteria are met. In order to obtain this temporary residency permit, one would have to either own or rent a property. They would have to have freely at the disposal a secure annual income emanating from abroad. It's around 2,000 euros per month, increased by 20% for the spouse and 15% for any additional children. It covers the applicant, the spouse, and any children up to the age of 18. This would be the temporary residency that would allow them to remain in Cyprus for a year. Many clients, however, wish to move to Cyprus on a more permanent basis, in which case there are other two options available. We have, depending on what they wish to purchase, we have what is called the category F, which is the normal route residency, permanent residency. In this case, they have to own or rent a property. There is no value indicated on that the property has to be, and owning is a considerable advantage compared to merely renting. They also have to have a secure annual income fully and freely at the disposal, which income is high enough to provide them with a decent living in Cyprus without engaging in any form of business, trade, or profession. It's important to note that though there is an indication of income that they have to have in the current regulations, which is about 10,000 for the main applicant and 5,000 for the spouse, each case is examined on its merits, and the authorities actually reserve the right to be able to request additional income And these regulations are currently under review. They are considering raising the bar a little bit on this.
Sorry, just to ask you one question. So the category F, is that a more permanent residency option than the first option you talked about, which is just an annual visa?
Yes, category F is one of the 2 permanent residency options that are, yes.
Yeah.
Under category F, the main applicant can apply together with a spouse and any children up to the age of 18. It takes about 24 months, I would say, to be approved. So it takes some time for it to be approved. Now, for those who wish to get permanent residency quite sooner, there is what is called the fast track. It is what is known as the category regulation 6.2 fast track. Okay, under this permit, one has to purchase a property of a minimum of 300,000 plus VAT, and it has to be from the primary market. So it has to be from a developer. It's not possible to buy a resale property and apply under this category. So anybody who is looking to purchase an off-plan or a new build from a developer or in a new complex would be looking at this route. There is an annual income requirement. There has to be at least a 30,000 minimum annual income for the main applicant, increased by 5,000 for the spouse, and 8,000 euros for any child, or even a dependent can be a parent or a parent-in-law of the main applicant, and provided the main applicant can show that they have an additional 8,000 euros to support them, then they will all be eligible. It is valid for life, and it covers the children, the children up to the age of 25 that are in full-time education. And the children it's important here to note that the children would keep the permanent residency under this category for life. It does not end when they turn 18.
Thank you, Esme. And on the category F then that you said could take up to 24 months, do you have to start that 2 years before you want to move, or can you apply for the annual permit and be in country on that permit whilst you're applying for the category F?
Exactly. So
okay.
Clients come and see us, we would start the temporary residency permit. Simultaneously, we would apply for the category F, and they would be on a temporary residency basis until their category F permanent residency is approved.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That is very expansive. Nick, we have a question in. We have quite a lot of questions in. Thank you, everyone. One here from Peter Tyso. He's a UK civil service pension and a UK local government pension. Will they still be taxed at source, which is his belief if he were to become a tax resident in Cyprus? And would it be a tax liability that's fairly minimal, given it's a relatively modest salary that Peter has with the UK? He also receives a UK state pension.
Yeah. Okay. The first part of the question, in the 2019 dual taxation agreement that was put in place between the UK and Cyprus, it was stated within there that any UK government funded pension schemes, so local government, central government, armed forces, police, NHS, so on, would be taxed at source in the UK, irrelevant of whether the individual lived in Cyprus. However, pretty quickly, there was a pushback on that. As many people know, there's 3 sovereign bases, 3 army and RAF bases here in Cyprus. So we have quite a large ex-military expat community. So there was a pushback, and the UK government agreed, and HMRC agreed to allow an extra period of 5 years. So up until 2024, you can still declare your UK government funded schemes in Cyprus and take advantage of the lower tax rates. My understanding is they are trying to negotiate an extension to the 2024 timeline at present, but at this moment in time, we don't know whether or not that is going to happen. So at this moment in time, you can declare your UK government funded schemes here in Cyprus, and then at the minute it would be, as it stands, you would have to declare them in the UK, or they would be taxed at source in the UK come 2024. With regards to the UK state pension, again, if you had a UK government scheme, you could take advantage of using your personal allowance in the UK, and then declare your UK state pension in Cyprus and just pay 5% tax on that. So you can sort of manipulate it so as that it works well for you.
Okay, so the reason for them pushing back on the taxing the military, in particular the military pensions at source back in the UK, is because it's a beneficial regime in Cyprus, and essentially they'd be better off by being taxed in Cyprus rather than the UK.
Absolutely, yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, I've got clients that have substantial police pensions and so on, and they're taking advantage of a 5% tax rate. Wow. Where they will be paying in excess of 40% if they were taxed at source in the UK.
Right. Okay. So what's the case then whilst we're on pensions? What about private pensions, as in non-government pensions? If I'm retiring, if I'm moving from the UK and I've got a pension pot that I built up with Scottish widows or whomsoever, how do you get involved? Is that stuff that you deal with as well?
Certainly, yeah. We help with that. I mean, that would come under the overseas pension scheme. So again, you have the option to choose that if you take less than 19,500 a year from that pension, you can offset that against the personal allowance, and it would be tax free. If you're gonna, the tip over point where you can make the choice is around about 25,000 euros a year. So if your pension income's in excess of 25,000 euros a year, it's better to elect for the overseas pension tax at 5%, because it's much more beneficial. But in terms of structuring, you can take, if you've got a pot that's not been taken at all, you're still entitled to take your tax-free cash in Cyprus as well, in the same way as that you would in the UK. But again, it's the case in each individual circumstances. We would do a review of each individual client's pension and arrangements and look at how we can structure that in the most tax efficient manner for them.
And a question here from Matthew Judge, who probably fits the profile of a number of your clients then. In terms of income that Esme was referring to as a requirement to satisfy some of the residency permit criteria, Matthew asks about property rental income. What's the situation with that? How does that work, Nick?
If it's UK property rental income,
yeah,
that will any UK derived property rental income will still be declarable and taxed in the UK. However, it's not taxed further in Cyprus. However, you would put that on your tax return and confirm that you have that overseas income. But it will stay declarable in the UK on any UK derived rental income. But at this moment in time, you would still have your UK personal allowance to offset against that income. Whether that changes in the future, who knows? But at this moment in time, you would still have that, and there would be no further liability on it in Cyprus.
Okay, so it's not deemed part of your global wealth and therefore taxable now that you're tax resident in Cyprus. It continues to be taxed in the UK?
It does. That's part of the dual taxation agreement, that any UK rental income would be taxed in the UK.
Okay. Esme, Annie Craig asks, she's just picking up on your explanation about the category F residency permit. Did you make a reference to a property purchase and whether there was a particular price for a property that you had to spend as part of the KKF? She just missed that point.
No, what I mentioned is that there is no minimum purchase price currently specified. There is an indication that this may be changing in the near future, and they might be putting a minimum price that the property has to be. But at the moment, there is no minimum purchase price specified.
Okay, and how many, Stuart Stansfield would like to know, with your explanation about the temporary permit, the annual renewable permit, how many years can you live in Cyprus on that temporary permit? Can you just keep renewing that?
Yes, and after 7 years, you can actually apply for citizenship.
Okay, I see. I hope that answers your question, Stuart. And are these processes relatively straightforward, or are these the sorts of things that you do on behalf of clients, Esme?
Yes, we would assist the clients with the whole process, explain what is needed, assist them to collect all the necessary documentation and give them guidelines. And we would accompany them, of course, to the immigration interview.
Okay, thank you. And I guess whilst we're kind of moving into the area of retirement, people no longer working, we're moving on into later life, then there's all the considerations about making a will and estate planning without bringing the room down too much today. Do you help people do you recommend people take wills if they become resident in Cyprus, Esme?
Under current legislation, okay, it is the law of the country in which the deceased had as habitual resident at the time of death that will govern the distribution of the estates and the assets. So unless somebody wants the law of Cyprus to apply to the distribution of their estate upon death, it is highly advisable that, yes, they do have a will drafted and prepared and actually even lodged in the courts here in Cyprus. And because once they do that, they have the option of choosing in the will the law of the nationality to apply. Cyprus has very strict forced heirship rules. So Cyprus does not allow, for example, someone to disinherit their children or their wife. They have a specific way in which one has to dispose of his assets. A person, a British national, however, has the option to choose the law of his nationality to apply to his will, thereby bypassing the Cyprus forced heirship rules and choosing himself how he wishes to dispose of his assets in his will.
Okay, so if you had a Cypriot asset, let's say a house, and you didn't take out didn't produce a local will that referred back to a different set of choices you'd made, like in your English will, then the default would be, it would be forced heirship as per Cypriot law.
Yes, depending on whether there is a spouse, children, how many children, grandchildren, and it would be divided accordingly. Only a small portion of one's estate can be disposed of by a will in Cyprus. A very small portion, and again, that portion depends on how many descendants and the testator has. Okay.
And I guess this is an area that you get into as well, Nick, there, because people will be considering, you know, what happens to their estate when they do pass and assets they have in Cyprus. How does that work vis-a-vis, you know, having assets in the UK, having assets in Cyprus? How do you get involved and help people with that issue?
Yeah, as Esme mentioned there, I think wherever you have assets, you should have a will in that jurisdiction. However, there's certain ways and means, so for example, with investments and savings, where we can have nominated beneficiaries on their investments and pensions, which sit the assets outside of the probate and the will. So it makes things a lot simpler. And that's part of what we do. We do quite a lot of estate planning, inheritance tax planning as part of our overall bespoke sort of solutions for clients. So it is just a case of making sure that things are planned in the correct manner and structured in the correct way so as that each individual makes sure the assets go where they want them to go.
Thanks, Nick. I got a question here from Jane James. She's asking, can the indication of income be from savings rather than income generated by, I guess, from a job or something? Can it be savings, profit from a house sale, or does it need to be regular monthly income? I guess that's one best for Esme to fulfill the requirements of the residency permits.
Yes. The regulations state that it has to be a secure and steady annual income emanating from abroad. So it actually refers to a regular income. In the temporary residency, however, there have been some recent changes, and there is a mention of deposit. It is very, very new. It's only come out on Monday. So we are waiting for some clarification from the immigration department. We did ask them, trying to get some more clarification prior to this, but they don't even know it's so recent. So there is a slight possibility that for the temporary, deposits may be accepted. Stay tuned on this. If anybody has any questions, once I know more, I will be more than happy to give further clarification on this. But at the moment, it is a steady and regular annual income that they're looking for, such as pensions, for example.
Sure. And if you could just clarify for Stephen Cornish. Stephen Cornish is intending to buy a villa at the moment, but it's not a new build. Is he right that the fast track's not available to him because it's a resale? I think that was the point that you made.
Yes, if it's a resale and it's not from the primary market, from a developer, then unfortunately the fast track wouldn't apply. They would go by the category F regulations. So.
Okay, and another question there. I think we've actually covered that one. That was on rental income. So Nick, I know you've also worked with British people who've already made the move to Cyprus and suddenly think, oh, there's a few things we should have thought about here. Is that a significant part of your business as well, existing British residents in Cyprus?
Yes, definitely. I mean, even more so since the changes from Brexit. You know, people lived in the UK for many years and dealt with wealth managers, financial advisors in the UK who were providing them a good service, and they built up a good rapport and relationship with. And since Brexit, UK advisors are no longer allowed to provide advice in the EU. So that puts us in quite a strong position, as well as the fact that we have our UK arm, our UK FCA regulated arm based in London. We also have independent registrations here in Europe. So we've been able to pick up where a lot of people have been getting contact from advisors telling them that they can no longer provide them with advice. So we've been able to pick up the slack there and help the clients and continue to give them a standard of advice that they're used to, and an approach to advice that they're used to. I think the UK approach has always been, throughout Europe, has always been a high standard when it comes to in regards to wealth management and financial advice. And as a company, we work by that ethos, really.
Yeah, so this is the loss of, I think the term's passporting then, isn't it, of financial services cross borders since the UK chose to leave the EU. So Blevins, I know, is regulated in each of the jurisdictions that it operates in. Yeah,
that's right. We have registrations in each of the jurisdictions and meet the. I mean, pretty much everyone you deal with from Blevins Franks will be UK FCA qualified, which, as I mentioned, the qualification level in the UK is much higher than a lot of the other countries. But also myself and Lou, who's the other person that gives advice here in Cyprus, we also have the CySEC, who are the Cypriot regulator. We have the CySEC advanced financial qualification as well. So we meet local requirements as well.
A couple of questions from Daniel and Mohammed Qureshi around work visas. Do you know much about work visas, Esme? Is that something that you could just give us an overview of?
Yes. Look, it's not easy to be able to work. At present, one would have to either be employed by a Cypriot company who would apply for them to get a work permit. So there has usually to get that approved, it has to be in a field of expertise where there is not much competition with Cypriots or Europeans. So it is possible to get a work permit through a company, through a Cypriot company. There is also the nomad visa for those who wish to come to Cyprus and work remotely, not offer services in Cyprus, but rather offer services to employees or clients abroad. So that is also an option. And the third option is to set up what is called a company of foreign interest, whereby the shareholders are non-EU, non-European citizens. The company has to show a projected line of business to get approved, and the company would actually employ the applicants that want to live here. They would be the directors, they would pay themselves remuneration and would be employed by the Cypriot company and would get work permits. So their own Cypriot company would employ them. It's a somewhat, it's a new government policy now to attract people who want to set up businesses in Cyprus. I'm happy to offer more detailed advice if they would like to get more information on this.
Sure, I'm sure it's quite complex. So how would it work for somebody like James Ferguson? He wants to move to Cyprus, apply for residency, but continue to run his UK business from Cyprus. That's just perfect? That's proof of income and everything?
Yes, because he would meet the criteria of a steady annual income coming from abroad. He would not be working in Cyprus because all the residency permits I referred to before do not allow the applicants to carry out any trade or profession in Cyprus. So he would be offering services out of Cyprus. So that would be ideal. He would be able to qualify both for the temporary and for the permanent residency for that.
And if James was taking income from that business, would that deem him to be working, or would he need to take it as a dividend, or is there a way around something like that?
It would be in his benefit to take it as dividends. If it's a UK company and he's tax resident here in Cyprus, any dividends are tax-free. You would only have a liability on dividends once you've been in Cyprus for 17 out of 20 tax years. So that's quite a long time before he needs to start worrying about that. If you're also tax resident in Cyprus, there's a current situation at the moment where we have people who have been running businesses from Cyprus, UK businesses, and they dispose of the shares or dispose of the full business in the UK. And whilst they're Cypriot tax resident, there's no tax charge at all for them. There's no tax in the UK on the sale and disposal of the business, and there's no tax on the disposal of the business whilst living in Cyprus. So you can actually dispose of shareholdings without any liability. But a lot of people do come here, take dividends, and dividends are tax-free.
James, some very good news for you there. If make yourself redundant and then get yourself to Cyprus and pay yourself in dividends and sell your business or whatever. I'm not trying to tell you what you do, but that sounds quite a beneficial tax regime for somebody in James's position, and also it satisfies proof of income for the residency permit. So I hope that helps you, James. And I think we're pretty much done on that. A question on, could UK property be transferred into a limited company and profits taken as dividends? Is that getting a bit too technical, Nick, or is that something you've got insight of?
Yes, it's possible to do so. Yeah, you can do that. You'd need to take advice from a UK-based accountant to do that. Really, to settle to. But from a Cyprus point of view, it would still be subject to, any profits would still be subject to corporation tax in the UK. But yeah, you could certainly do that and take the income in Cyprus as dividends, which would be very beneficial, because as I mentioned before, dividends are completely tax-free.
And an interesting question from Christine Maxwell for you, Esme. Does Cyprus recognise UK civil partnerships?
It would be better if we have a situation now where the clients they've actually married abroad, and Cyprus won't allow it, and it says ask them to register the civil partnership here. So what we could do for them is to register the civil partnership here in Cyprus for it to be accepted. Are they talking for, I'm not sure if they're referring for the purposes of residency or?
I'm not sure. I think probably when you were explaining about residency options and talking about an additional for a spouse, whether that qualifies paying, just paying extra 20% for a second person rather than two individual applications.
What we would do, we would register the civil partnership here in Cyprus, and then it would be acceptable.
Okay.
For immigration purposes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for your time and your insight today. Blevins Franks, I know, produces a tax guide, Nick, I think I'm right in saying, to Cyprus. That's a publication. I know it can be bought off the Blevins Franks website, but if you want to email inquiries at blevinsfranks.com, they will send you a PDF version of that for free, I believe. You can also go to the website blevinsfranks.com/knowledge/Blevins Franks Guides Cyprus. You'll find it on the website. Go and have a look there, or email inquiries at blevinsfranks.com. So that's where you can find out more about the tax regime and the tax benefits of relocating to Cyprus. Nick and his team will be attending our exhibitions next spring. We have one in Manchester next March, and then we have another one in London in June. We're going to send everybody a copy of this recording, and in there you'll have contact details both for Nick and the Blevins Franks business, and of course for Esme and Esme's business, and how she can help you with residency and anything to do with the legal side of things. So thank you everybody for your time today. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Esme. It's been good to chat with you both.
Thank you very much.
And I hope we've helped you get some insight into the issues around relocating to Cyprus. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.